Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside the Issues. Inside the Issues is sponsored by the League of Women Voters Richfield. And today we're going to learn about inspections. Somebody who has a house or rental property has probably already come in contact with the inspections department. But most of us, I suspect, don't really know a whole lot. And so I am calling this Inspections 101. And I'm very pleased to have with me two city staff from the City of Richfield. On my immediate left is Rick Regnier, and you're Chief Buildings Official.
Yes.
Does that mean you have people that report to you?
Yes, I've got two building inspectors, a plumbing mechanical inspector, two clerical positions, and then there's two other building inspectors that do rental and point of sale mostly, and that's Jennifer, and they don't report directly to me, but when there's problems and issues, we work together. So.
And then you would report to the city manager.
I report to John Stark,
Oh,
the
that's
community
right.
development director.
Yeah,
So.
and so then he's, okay, so that's the tree. And then my far left is Jennifer Grindy, and she's the housing inspector.
Yep.
Welcome to the show, both of you. And
Thanks
again,
for having
I
us.
thank you for taking time out of, you probably would be done with work right now, so you're taking time out of your
Fine.
spare time.
Happy to be here. So.
Okay. I usually start out my programs by just asking each one of you to say a few words about yourself, how you came to be where you're at, a little bit of maybe professional history.
Okay.
So,
Well, I went to technical college right out of high school for an electrician. So I'm a little unusual for a building official to be starting out in career as an electrician. So went to school for that, worked as an electrician for about 11 years in a variety of construction, residential, commercial, industrial, and then I just kind of needed a career change and started taking some night classes and saw an opening for electrical inspector. And to be an electrical inspector, you have to have a state electrician's license, and I do have that. So that's where I got a job in Richfield working as an electrical inspector and started taking night classes and just kind of moved up. And it's such a small world that the person that hired me, his name is Sievert Hendrickson, and he was in the building code industry for a long time. The state building code started in 1972, and that's when they came up with a building official certification. So everybody's
in 1972.
72 when they had a state building code. I mean, cities all had city codes before
Before
that.
that.
That's when there's one uniform state building code that's supposed to be enforced throughout the state. So it's the same in every city. So you don't go to one city and have one code to deal with, go to another city, have a different code with different rules, and it just makes it hard to build that way. So they came up with one uniform code. But in 1972, they started a building official certification. It's called the Certified Building Official. Well, Sievert Hendrickson and one other person who worked at the state at the time when they came up with this, and they did a coin flip to see who could be the number one building official. So they number them by the order that you get your building official. He won the coin flip, so he was the number one building official in the state, and he always used to joke about that. So
Another little bit of a feather in Richfield's cap.
yeah, so it was nice. And then he retired within a year or two after I started, and they hired a person named Dennis Neidecker as the building official. And he grew up he lived in the same town where I grew up. His son and I were best friends pretty much in
for
high school.
heaven's sakes.
I worked for him for one summer right after high school building steel buildings because he owned a company that built steel implement like John Deere dealers and that. So I spent summer working there. It was just a fluke that he ended up in Richfield as a building official.
Small world.
It is a small world. And then in 1996, I got promoted to the building official, and I've been there ever since. So I've seen a lot of change in Richfield in that many years.
Oh
so.
my goodness, yes. And that's, some places there is no ability to start on the bottom like that. But you were taking classes and certifications.
And it was a little bit unusual. I had a job as an inspector, and I was taking classes after I already had a job because I was doing electrical inspections, and I've got certified from the organization that writes the code books. I'm certified as a plans examiner, building inspector, mechanical inspector, and Then I have my state building official certification and a master electrician's license. So I've kind of got
Wow. Yeah,
quite a background in construction. So
a lot of practical experience.
yes, we've run into a lot of things.
Now, you said you are a building official in kind of an unusual way. I take it it's the work up. So the other folks, do they just come into the job, they go to school and get and then, not so much the practical?
Well, the unusual part for me is I start out as an electrician. Most building officials are carpenters. They start out in the building carpenters. They start in or some of the construction trades, whether it's pouring concrete, drywall, bricklayers. There's all kind. It's more prevalent to be in the building trade, not in the electrician to be the building official. So, yeah. So that's what's a little bit unusual. But
Yeah, but important to have somebody who knows what an electrician should be doing. Okay. Jennifer.
My story is a lot simpler. My dad was a building inspector and was one of the first ones, I suppose the top 100 to get licensed in the state, and then switched and became a custom home builder. And I grew up on the job site.
I was just going to say, I bet you tagged along.
Yep, and I worked for him for a long time and was going to take over the family business. And we had one inspector that came out and wrote some correction orders on the job, and my dad was like, well, according to this section in the UBC, this is an alternate form. And the gal was like, you'll do it my way. And I just remember being so amazed that he could quote code sections, and I went, oh gosh, if I'm going to take over the family business, I want to quote code sections. So I took a building inspection class. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I loved every minute of it. I looked around and went, wait a minute, these are all broken down old contractors with bad knees and bad backs and have been chasing money for 20 years. Maybe I should just be a building inspector and have paid vacations and weekends off and a guaranteed paycheck. I couldn't get enough. My dad was really disappointed that I went to the dark side, so to speak. But I mean, it was really cool. So I've been at it. This is my 20th year as an inspector, my 18th in Richfield. So
wow.
Yep. So
now I have to ask this question. All of us know that females is, it's only been in the last 30 years that we even really see you guys or us girls in positions like this. Did you run into any issues?
Oh, I still do. And it's
do.
fun. And I think I take it with a grain of salt. Like I said, I grew up in the trades, and even in high school I worked in an auto parts store. I've always done jobs that girls aren't supposed to do. So I more have fun with it. We still have fun with it. Sometimes I will write a correction order and they'll come to the counter and say, I want to talk to one of the guys. And the guys that I work with, I'm so lucky, play along, because I'll go up to the counter and say, well, they want to talk to one of the guys. So I'll bring one of the guys up and they'll ask that guy the same question. And our inspector will say, well, I don't know, let me ask Jennifer. Jennifer. I mean, they know the answer, but they play along, and it's just kind of, it's fun.
Well, you almost have to. I did building management for the last 11 years of my career and worked very intimately with the university facilities management group. And my boss was male, and first we used to hold meetings with them, and it was the same thing. They turned. Finally, he said, "I'm not going to be there anymore. She knows the stuff." So she can handle it, but it was a little bit of a learning curve, and they teased me incredibly, but I had a good time. And I guess you just learned to, as long as it's not too bad, you let it roll.
Well, and it's never been like that. I mean, like I said, I have a good team, and we are all a good team, and they're all super supportive, and we just more make fun of people like that. And I usually warm them up. I mean, I do have a few cantankerous folks that have just hated me out of the gate, and we get them. They love me in the end.
Well, and the reason, like I grew up on a farm, and I was the oldest, and so, I was there tagging along with my dad as he did, construction. He was able to build buildings even, on the farm, and So, yeah, it's not a traditional feminist role, but I'm so glad that
Well, and I hired Jennifer, 18 years ago, and my only concern was, I mean, she understood the code, she answered all the questions, she was great, but I'm thinking, I hope that, she's tough enough, because some people, the same thing, some males don't want a young lady telling them what to do. And she's tough as nails. She's done a great job. She is.
I deliver it with sugar.
Yes.
I try to deliver it with a little sugar. And I think that's really key. I mean, we're in people's homes and they're their castles, and they don't want to be told by anyone that something's wrong.
As you say, your old dad was
Yeah.
not sure about you going over to the other side.
The dark side.
But I think this is as good point as any to say, why inspections? Why do we have you guys working?
Well, it's we're trying to make people have safe homes, safe businesses. I mean, people don't ever think about when you walk into a building, is it safe? If I need the handrail, is there a handrail there? Is it at the right height? Is it going to fall off the wall? If the wind's blowing real hard, is my house going to blow over? My garage going to blow over? If we get a big snowstorm, is it going to cave in? Are the steps built correctly so that you have the right rise and run so you don't have tripping hazards? And all those little, we can go over the building codes a little later, and maybe this isn't a time to do it.
Yeah, this is good.
We searched and searched. This is our building code, city ordinances in Richfield.
All in one.
Everything from 1944. There's about 8 pages in here that pertain to the building code that tells you how to build things, how big a concrete blocks to use, and how to build the steps. So there's about 6 or 8 pages in here pertaining to the building code. We measured just the state building code before we came over here, and it's going to be approximately 18 inches tall of full-size sheets of paper that's the state building code now. So it's gotten so much more complicated, and there's a lot of different materials, and when we do our job, most people never know, because if we're dealing with a contractor and they're doing a siding job or a roofing job and they don't sell some flashing correctly, we tell the contractor they have to fix it. They come out and fix it. The homeowners a lot of times don't even know we haven't fixed anything, because the contractors don't really want to admit they did something wrong.
Yeah.
And if they have a minor leak somewhere, they're probably not going to notice it for 5, 10, 15 years. But when they notice it, they're going to have a lot of rotted wood, and it's going to cost thousands of dollars to repair. So if they don't have those repairs, a lot of times we've made people fix things and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's, so people take all this building safety for granted and don't realize what it takes to get things done correctly. If your kitchen, if it's wired correctly now, you can plug in 2-3 appliances and you're not going to trip out circuit breakers.
Well, and when you stop and think of it, I mean, I even think about my home was a Richfield Rambler built in the mid-50s. That electrical conduit is still going through there. No one ever sees it. Upstairs, in the attic, there's conduit going across, covered with insulation. And you can only hope that they did it well. But I'm sure that since the 50s, there's been so many improvements. So it's even a little scary to think that,
Yeah. And most of the Richfield houses, they're wired in a metal conduit, which is better than there's some old knob and tube wiring, which is kind of hard to explain without pictures. But we have very few with that older style wiring. Most of it's a better wiring that's in Richfield. Some of the insulation on the wiring is a lot better now than it used to be. It can withstand a lot hotter temperatures and.
Well, and also we got different amount and types of appliance being plugged in. The water heater technology is different than what it was in the 50s. And there's just so many more different kinds of materials. The chemicals used are very much different.
When, the number of circuits, back when most of the houses were built in Richfield, it required a single 20-amp circuit for both the laundry and the entire kitchen. So if you had your washer going, but I mean, maybe people had a toaster and an old Ringer wash machine, and which didn't take that much electricity, and we didn't have all the appliances and that we do now. And now you have to have at least 2 20-amp circuits in the kitchen, one for the laundry. Then if you have a microwave, that's in a separate circuit. Dishwasher's a separate circuit. Microwave's a different, disposal's a separate circuit. So there's so much more wiring added to kitchens now than there was, 50 years ago. So
so many more things plugged in, you know, with the like you said, microwaves and your Keurig and your computer and your, you know, all these different things that are all going at the same time.
And probably more, what do you call them? Surge protectors are the only ones I use, but the multiple outlet that go into a single outlet type of things too, which can be dangerous.
They can be dangerous if they get overloaded, and most of them aren't legal. So Jennifer gets those taken out
I
of
get
houses
those
all
a
the
lot.
time.
I
Do you want to just give an example at this point? I mean, we're going to go a little more into,
Well, for sure. I mean,
as long as we're talking electrical.
Yep, that outlet's designed, you know, it has 2 plugs. That's what it's designed for. It isn't designed to have 6 different things, and we'll see a 6-way adapter and then another surge protector plugged into that, and they have everything under the sun plugged in, and they can't figure out why their popcorn won't pop in the microwave because it's going really slow because it's getting such a draw. And if the outlet's wired wrong on top of that, I mean, it can be a disaster.
And we've
So.
had a few fires
For sure.
in Richfield.
For sure. Good thing we have good response time.
Yes, I found that out when a fire detector malfunction, you know, with the home security system. And, you know, as fast as I could get a hold of the company to turn it off, the West Side Fire Department was there because I'm only a few blocks
Yep.
from that one.
It's got to make you feel good.
Yeah.
Makes me feel good, but after the second time it malfunctioned within a couple of days, I had them out and to replace the whole thing. I'm not
Right.
going to keep bothering the fire department. But
Sure thing.
yeah. Okay. So let's say a homeowner wants to put in a new furnace. What does he do? And sometimes maybe he doesn't even really have to call you.
Well,
You show up.
no, we don't. I mean, we don't know if people are doing work. They're required to take out a permit. And
Yeah.
for something like a furnace, most people do hire a licensed contractor because it's a lot of work to take things in and out. You have to work with gas piping and you have to make ductwork changes. So a lot of times people will hire contractors. They don't have to. If you own your house and it's a single family home and you live there, our city ordinance does allow you to do that work yourself. You still have to take out a permit, you still have to get it inspected, but you can do it yourself.
Okay.
If it's a rental property or it's a duplex, you have to hire licensed contractors for plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. And part of that, it's in the city ordinance, but it's, you know, we're protecting the people that live there now and
Well,
future people. Because if we put a furnace in, it's going to last for a long time. And you sell your house a year later, the next person that buys that house has, you know, if it's a problem or it's a safety hazard, they have to, you know, deal with that problem. So
Yeah. So most of the times, if you have a contractor doing or some kind of company or whoever is selling you the furnace, they will contact the city, fill out the applications, and give you the permit.
they'll get the permit.
Get the permit.
And then they're supposed to schedule an inspection when it's completed. And then we'll send an inspector out to check it, make sure things are installed correctly. So make sure the vent was installed correctly, the right size, and make sure there's any problems with that. And you know, the electrical's installed correctly. There has to be a switch for that, for a disconnect.
Okay.
And you know, if there's an air conditioner, they need a condensate drain that gets to a floor drain so you don't get water all over your floor. So
Yeah.
While it is the contractor's responsibility, the homeowner should definitely call the city and make sure it got done.
Okay.
Because if you get a furnace replaced now and your contractor didn't pull a permit, they said they did or they charged you for it or what have you, and 2 or 3 years from now you go to sell your house, and I'm going to come and do the inspection and look and go, well, there's no permits for any of this. And now you can't get a permit after the fact by, 3 or 4 years. So now you're stuck with other more expensive alternatives. A permit's right around $35, and it's really simple, and it covers you, and it's kind of a little mini insurance plan that your contractor did it right.
And do you get a sense of who's good installers of different things and who you maybe haven't heard of, and maybe you look at theirs much more carefully, maybe?
You know, we try to look at them all the same. I mean,
Okay.
and again, we're just spot checking certain items. We're not on the job the entire time things are getting built or installed, and we
Right.
can't see everything. So, but you kind of learn what to look for, and if see if there's issues, and
Yeah, the reason I asked that is I had a window totally replaced. I mean, they started with the new stuff with just a square hole in the wall. And I was so amazed because the inspector came out and said this was done by renewal by Anderson, and he wanted to know which one of the windows that he put in, so I showed him the paperwork. And he looked, I could see his eyes, scanning, but, and he said renewals are really good. So I got the sense in some ways that he had built up a trust for renewal that probably wouldn't be there for just some Tom, Dick, or Harry. So I was just curious.
yeah.
I mean, obviously they're supposed to treat everybody the same, but, there's them and there's them.
Yeah, and it's, you can still trust contractors, but you have to verify. You still have to look at the work and make sure that, because a lot of what we're doing is making sure somebody didn't forget something.
Forget something.
They forgot to do this or whatever. They took a break and they forgot to finish up something, and then they're done. And that's a lot of what we find is something they just forgot to finish, forgot to install correctly. So.
Okay. And then the other thing they really are looking at, and they seem to every time do it, they want to see the smoke detectors in the bedrooms and hallways or various places.
Absolutely. Smoke detectors save lives.
And that's the big reason for it.
That is the number one reason.
In the building code, it does require every time you take out a building permit for anything inside the house, you're required to have smoke detectors installed if you don't have them. In existing rooms where it's finished, you can put battery ones in, but that's part of the building code, so that's one of the things we check. And if there's ever a fire in your house, the first thing, especially if somebody gets hurt or something, the first thing say, well, they didn't have any smoke detectors. And we're required to check those if there's a building permit. So that's why every time there's a building permit, we should be going around checking smoke detectors. And a lot of times, nobody's checked the batteries for years, and they don't work. So.
Yep, and that's, what is it? Every New Year's Day, replace the 9-volt batteries.
I do mine twice a year with daylight savings time. Every
twice
time.
a year is
Yep.
probably even better. Just
Then they
in
don't
case.
chirp at 3 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
ever.
And
Okay.
my dog hates it when they start chirping, so.
Oh, they do.
If it starts chirping at 3 in the morning, I have no choice. I have to get up there and take the smoke
Replace
detector
it.
Well, if
out.
you did them
You
twice
want
a
to-
year, you wouldn't have that problem.
I know.
Do you think they'll ever get to the point of requiring the CO2?
They do by state statute now. It's required
Oh,
within 10
okay.
feet of all the bedrooms.
Okay.
So we have that too. So, and that, they have it by the bedrooms rather than near the furnace room. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a lot like the flu. You just don't feel well. And I guess one way to figure it out is walk outside, and if you start feeling better right away, you might have a problem. And then they have put them near the bedrooms so that if you're sleeping,
It'll-
you're going to hear it, because that's where you're most likely to really succumb to it.
Yeah.
So,
And again, I think there's just this emphasizing. Inspections really are to save you money and maybe even a life. So
And
you guys are the good guys. You're not on the dark side.
right.
and we answer so many questions with homeowners and contractors about if there's a question about how to build something, if there's how big can you build the garage and setbacks, and then also what different materials. And there's, again, so many different rules in our 18 inches of building code. It's very difficult for even contractors to understand all the different items, especially when they get something they haven't really done before. So we get questions all the time from contractors, and as far as how to do something, because they don't want to have to go back and do it twice either.
Yeah.
So,
And that changes too. The laws and codes and whatnot change.
yeah, they publish all the new building codes and electrical codes every 3 years, and the state adopts the electrical code every 3 years, but the building code doesn't get adopted. They skip a section. So every 6 years we have a new building code, which we're going to have another one March 31st of 2020 is when they're scheduled to adopt the next building code. And what gets more difficult for us is every 3 years they change things and we don't adopt the midterm one. So now we have 2 code cycles of changes to try to keep track of what's going on.
up.
And the same with architects and contractors. There's a lot, things that do get changed, and that's usually what people miss right away when a code gets changed. So
So does that mean you got to go pull
Continuing
out the
ed.
books and look and read and whatnot?
Yes, and continuing ed every year we
Oh.
go
Yes.
to classes and
So that is a requirement to be
Yes.
an inspector.
yeah.
Yep, you're required to maintain your certification to have so many hours a year of training,
Okay.
and you do really need it to try to keep up on all the different materials and different
Yeah.
code sections. And
Wow, I can't even imagine trying to page through, much less read, an 18 inches of material. My goodness.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, I
target.
mean, and one thing about the website and technology now is, I mean, you can go in and you want to build a shed outside, just a storage shed. There it is, all laid out and very nicely put.
yeah, and sometimes things on YouTube isn't maybe the best or correct
Oh,
way
I
to
didn't
build
mean
things.
YouTube.
Okay,
I meant the
I do
City
that.
of Richfield
Oh, I do. I look up things on YouTube all the time if I'm trying to work on a four-wheeler or boat or something,
Oh,
and you have
sure.
to sort through them. And I'm sure there's things on building things and how to build things, and some of those may not be accurate either. So
Yeah.
story.
Well, I built one, but I had the inspector come out. I think it's probably 25 years ago. And I'm looking now, and I'm thinking maybe something has changed in that because I'm not sure mine meets the code. Talk a little bit about grandfathering. There is such a thing in some areas, isn't it?
Wait, and in one of the chapters of the Minnesota State Building Code, so that the Minnesota State Building Code, there's I think I don't know, at least 17 or more chapters of it. So it's the commercial building code, residential building code, energy code, electrical code, plumbing code, mechanical code, and accessibility code, and there's also a chapter on existing buildings. And the general rule is if it complied with code at the time it was built, you don't have to change it.
Okay.
And it's just kind of a common sense thing, because if the codes change every 3 years, some of these, especially bigger buildings, they start building it under one code. There's a different code before they're done. You can't make them go back and tear out stuff and change things that were legal and met code at the time it was adopted. So we do have to look at, did it comply originally when it was built, and if it did, we don't require those things to be changed.
Have you ever felt that for whatever reason when you told them that they couldn't do this or couldn't do it that way, do people really get irate? I mean, in this day and age of immediate access to guns and whatnot, I mean, has anybody ever threatened a building inspector?
Oh, for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to our 4-minute response time for police and fire. We have great support, not only in the office but in the field, and people do get out of line and out of hand, and I've had to take a police escort back to inspections. It doesn't happen a lot. I especially, as a woman,
Yes.
if I really trust my instincts, and if things are feeling a little off, then I'll politely excuse myself and go outside and try to put space. We try to de-escalate when people start getting elevated, and because people don't sometimes understand, and we try to explain, okay, this is why we were making you do this. This is to protect you, to protect your children. We're not here to make you mad and make your life miserable. We just want everybody to be safe. But yeah, there are some situations where we do need backup, and I'm,
It all of a sudden occurred to me that your job does have a certain amount of risk in it, and so I wanted to. Okay, we can move on from that. So,
Well, and one comment on that is, people a lot of times they think building inspectors were causing them money in this, and we had property owner that had a commercial business, and he was trying to build a restaurant in there with a partner, and he had done a lot of tenant finishing in there, and sometimes he didn't take out permits. I don't think he knew he needed a permit or not, and then we'd find out about it and have him change a few things, and I think it was a little bit frustrating for him. Well, then he started this restaurant project, and he's not a general contractor. They
No.
did a very good job with it, but he was getting a little frustrated. Then finally, the light bulb went off because he asked, "Well, you mean I can ask you questions about how to do this, and it doesn't cost me any more money?" I said, "No, you apply. You have a building permit. That's what your permit is." And after that, it was just like he would ask all these questions before he did it, because I don't like to go into a job and tell people to change things or fix things. And especially when you have an existing building, it's an older building, you're trying to make it something it wasn't before, there's always going to be problems that you can't foresee until you open up a wall and you find all the problems in there. And it was just refreshing to see it. It was just like the light bulb went on that, you mean I can call you up and ask you questions, you're not going to bill me for it? I said, no, I want to help you build this correctly.
Yeah. I mean, the City of Richfield has a real vested interest in making sure things are done right in our city. So, yeah, and that's probably an important part, for the audience to understand that they can always come to you, and it's always better to do it before you start than after you start. Any humorous stories we have here? Or
so
any
many.
story
Where to
that
start?
really is in your memory bank?
Where to start?
Some of them have to be careful so we don't get too close to which building it is.
If you can disguise the location.
Right. We've had some interesting ones. I've had a lot of people. I do rental inspections as well, so sometimes you see some crazy things in rental properties that you wouldn't necessarily see in a single family home. People answer the door naked an awful lot. That that part just kind of, I'm like, whoa, okay. And then they open the door and say, "Can you give me a minute?" And I'm like, that would have been what you said through the door. Please put some pants on. I got time.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me too once, and that's it takes you by surprise when it happens.
It does, and we have a lot of little dogs, or just a lot of silliness. I had a little boy this morning at an inspection, was in tears because he wanted to hug me goodbye, and he had peanut butter all over his fingers, and his mom kept saying, no, please, you're full of peanut butter, can you just give her a high five? And I said, no, it's okay, peanut butter's cool, we have a bunch of kids at home. I'm not scared of peanut butter, dirt, not made of sugar. The kids are what is so fun. The kids and the dogs are the one we remember the most.
And I had one small business owner, and he was doing a remodeling project, and he was frustrated because of all these requirements he had to do, and he was complaining about all these things he had to do. And I finally told him, because he didn't want to do them. And I said, well, here's a report from 6 months ago before you even started to plan doing this. I've listed all the requirements you have to do. Those are exactly what I'm telling you right now. He said, well, I know, but I just had to try.
Well, that's okay. You've got two new things that hit me on the website under inspections. A new electrical AFCI to protect existing outlets or something like that. Do I need to know what AFCI means?
Well, it's an arc fault circuit interrupter.
Oh, arc fault. That I understand.
And what that does is, so right now if you have a loose connection in, say, one of your outlets, and you have a little spark in there, that circuit breaker recognizes the sine wave is different because there's an arc in that circuit, and it shuts it off. Otherwise, it would have to build up to 20 amps. Or if it's a 15 amps before it would trip off the circuit breaker, but it can start a fire long before it ever gets to that point if you have a loose connection, because your load's not exceeding the circuit breaker, but you have an arc, and you get a loose connection and it starts building up heat, and that's a lot of times how electrical fires are started. So now in the electrical code, and they keep adding more rooms to it where you're required now to have that. So in a new house, you're gonna have these arc fault circuit breakers protecting most of the house inside.
So is that something that can be fairly easily done in an older home that doesn't have them?
It can be if all the wiring is done correctly.
Okay.
So, and it depends on how it's wired somewhat too, but
Okay. So it might be worth somebody like me in this, 60-year-old house to just call an electrician and say, can you put these in because it makes sense to me to have them?
it does. And what the problem if you have, is the way they wired houses in the past may not be quite the same. So if you have 2 circuits in one box and your neutrals should be separated, if you connect those neutrals together and you put an arc fault circuit breaker on that, there's a good chance it may trip out on just a nuisance tripping. And then you have to take apart all the boxes and try to find where that problem is, and that can be pretty expensive. If everything's wired correctly, you should be able to put a new arc fault breaker in, and it should work
Okay.
to protect it. But there can be some problems on how things are wired and whether
Yeah.
that works correctly or not. So
And then this whole RPZ, I should know what that means, but I don't remember. And the backflow preventer. Now that all sounds important. Can you put that in plain English? One of you?
I'm trying to remember exactly what RPZ stands for.
Well,
It's,
maybe don't. Just tell me
But
what it
it's-
does.
And usually those are in more commercial buildings than
Buildings,
RPZ. It's not a backflow preventer is the devices that Jennifer makes people put on their exterior hose bibs for connecting garden hose.
And laundry tub faucets.
And that, what does it do?
So that's like a little brass adapter that screws right on the faucets. So the laundry tub faucet and your outside faucets, anything you can hook a hose up to. And what it does, it has a little check ball inside it. So if there's a negative pressure on the water line, it sucks the ball in instead of what's ever in the hose.
Oh, that's
So
okay.
particularly if you have a hose kind of laying in the bottom of your laundry tub or that sort of thing, it can intermix and be a bad
And
deal. So
intercept it.
they're $5. If you have thumbs, you can put them on usually.
Okay.
It's harder to do without a thumb, but
I can see if somehow the main drain in the laundry tub plug, rather than have it go backwards and run into the wash machine.
and your wash machine has a built-in usually.
Oh,
Yep.
especially the modern ones.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
In, say, like in Richfield, any pretty much modern city where you have a good water supply, there's always water pressure, so it's really difficult to get water to go back in the water line.
Oh, okay.
If there'd be a large fire in the area and you have the fire trucks out connecting the hydrants, they actually, have pumps that draw the water out. That might be a case where you have it.
And you kind of almost get a vacuum in that.
Yes, and it's kind of a story on that. When my daughter, when she was going to college, she taught in Spain for a semester. So my wife and I went over there and visited her and stayed in her apartment for over there for a couple of weeks. And she was on the Mediterranean coast in Spain, and she was way up at the top of the hill where her apartment was. Some days she had really good water pressure. Some days a little bit. Some days a little trickle. Sometimes you open up the faucet and you hear air going inside the faucet.
Oh.
And you look out the window and they had a swimming pool there, and there's almost always a garden hose outside laying in the swimming pool. And everybody there drank bottled water. Everybody
okay.
around there. And it's like, I can see why, because their water pressure wasn't very steady, and sometimes if they didn't have enough,
It backed up.
and that's how I'm sure that swimming pool water is getting back in their water supply.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And that's, if they didn't have a backflow preventer on that fitting, it would be.
Yeah.
So that's where they're really important, because you don't want to be drinking somebody else's swimming pool water or anything else. So
Well, that makes sense. Okay, I think this is yours, Jennifer. Point of sale.
Ah, my baby.
Yeah, and I read the brochure and just literally took each highlight.
Used it as a punch list and now you're ready for inspection. Good. Perfect. Perfect.
So, well, first of all, that always wasn't a thing in Richfield to do a point of sale.
No, it wasn't. In 1989, council passed an amendment to the city code and required both point of sale inspections and rental licensing inspections, which started in October of 1990. So anything after that was inspected. And that was before me, but it was tough. It was a tough start. We're still working the bugs out even after all this time. We make little tweaks to the system and what makes sense and what's fair. And you mentioned grandfathering earlier. Some stuff is grandfathered in, but if it's a life safety issue,
No.
it's not. And that's kind of how we explain it to people. Okay, well, yes. The fact that your ceiling isn't quite tall enough and your basement is grandfathered in, but you have to have handrails and guardrails and smoke detectors everywhere. These things that, are going to save you and get you out. When I was a kid, I'm sure half my friends slept in those little basement bedrooms
Yeah.
with the tiny little windows. We're not going to let you do that anymore.
Nope.
You know,
I
we-
can tell you that from personal experience. I have an escape window.
Yep, and it's like a lot of us came home from the hospital with our moms holding us on the front seat, and when we know better, we do better, and we try to keep everyone safer than before. So,
And as I recall, there was another reason besides, safety issues. Richfield really wanted to keep their housing stock looking nice. right?
Absolutely.
Being good.
Absolutely,
Quality.
and I really credit our program for making Richfield one of the hottest real estate markets a couple years in a row. These houses go quickly, and they're worth a lot
Yeah.
because we want to maintain them,
Yeah.
and we don't. Dilapidation isn't part of our vocabulary in Richfield. So between the point of sale program and the rental program, we really try to stay on top of peeling paint and dilapidation and rotting wood and that sort of thing outside, as well as safety items inside.
And
So-
nobody wants to live next to a problem property with, again, broken
Yes.
windows, peeling paint, garbage and stuff all over and that's what this program does, is eliminate those issues. So
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to want to sell your home, you want your home looking quality material, but you also want the neighborhood looking good. I
Absolutely.
mean, if you can have a very, very nice home, but if all the houses around really look pretty bad, you're not going to get the money.
Right. And rental properties, rental properties get a bad rap anywhere, whatever city you're in. And people say, oh, I have this rental property by me, it's terrible. And hey, call me up. Because if it's a rental property, we inspect those every 2 years, and I have a better chance at getting something done at a rental property than maybe somebody who's in a single family home who's been there for 15 or 20 years and doesn't have the resources or the wherewithal to fix problems. Rentals we can usually get after,
Get the,
and we have some repercussions and a process where
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to go through than if it's owner occupied.
okay, I want to sell my house.
Okay.
I approach you, I fill out a form or something?
You come into the office and you see Natalie. She's super easy to work with and super fun, and you'd fill out an application and pay the fee, which is $150, and you'd schedule an inspection. The inspection's done by, there's another inspector, Dean or I, and we'll come out usually within a few days or maybe up to a week and do an inspection and type you up a list, and you can go one of two ways. You can either get the items done and re-inspected before you close, or your buyer can escrow for the items that are on the list. You can sell as is still, and
Okay,
they'd
that's
submit a bid from a contractor, and we'd approve the bid, and then the buyers would escrow and then have to repair those items within 60 days.
Okay, so there still is that option of selling your house as is. It's
Yes.
just that then the burden of getting it done becomes the buyer's
Right.
problem.
Right. So you have to go to closing with either a certificate of compliance, which means you got everything done, or that signed escrow agreement.
Waiver.
So it's fun.
Yeah.
We do a lot of things with a lot of homeowners, and like Rick said, we try to educate and explain, okay, this is why we're doing this. One of the things that just trips people up is how many smoke detectors they have to have. And they're little Richfield Rambler. And,
Yes.
why do I have to have them in all the bedrooms and in the hallway and in the basement? I don't even smoke.
Yeah.
Fires don't generally start with smokers anymore in this day and age. But compartmentalization is like the trigger word these days, or the key word, where you're supposed to sleep with your bedroom door closed. And if your bedroom door is closed, you're not going to know. if that fire is inside, outside. You're going to buy more time if it's outside your room. But if it's closed and your smoke detector's inside your bedroom, you want the hallway one to go out. You really want to have as much time as possible.
Let's say I know I'm going to be moving probably in 5-7 years, age-wise is creeping up. Can I get kind of a quote-unquote practice one done?
Some people do that. Now, the inspection's still $150. So
Yeah,
if you
I know.
if you had me out today and for your practice run, which people do, they want to get a kind of a handle on where they're going to go. You don't have to get it re-inspected. If you decide not to sell, I'm not going to call you in a year, because that inspection's good for a year. I'm not going to call you in a year and go, your inspection's expiring.
Yeah.
Did you do your correction orders? The easier way to do it would be just like you said, go through the checklist online and
The
and
checklist
just
online.
and
okay.
just I mean, that's not a full and complete list, but it's a big start. And if you went through that, you're well on your way for free to being where you probably really need to be, and it gives you an idea.
Yeah, it's, I follow the Richfield community page on Facebook. It's every once in a while there's a bit of, those point of sales.
My fans.
Yeah.
Your fans.
And one comment on the smoke detectors, the fire department, they have a really good video of a side-by-side, and I'm not sure what organization did it, but a house from 1950 with, wool carpet, with, wood furniture and cotton furniture and things like that, and compared to a house today with foam-filled couches and polyester blind, all these composite materials. And it is amazing when you watch that how fast a fire spreads today compared to 1950. You don't have much time to get out of a house if you have a fire.
It goes a
It
lot
never
faster.
occurred to me that all this stuff that we have in there is
Fuel.
petroleum-based and absolutely flammable.
Yep.
And also just the way new houses are built today, a lot of times they don't have dimensional lumber like a 2x10 floor
Yeah.
joist. It's different, particle board type products which burn a lot faster and lose their structural integrity a lot faster than a full dimensional wood does.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, as those of us who've tried to start a fire with wood and how the length of time it takes to go through a maple log.
Right. It's a lot different. You have a lot less time now. So the more warning you have to get out, the better off you are.
What are the common things that you find in the points of sales of these 50-year-old houses, 60-year-old houses?
A lot of them are the smoke detectors
Yeah.
and that open stairway into the basement. If your basement's unfinished and it's wide open on either side and there's no guardrail, no handrails. A lot of people do work without permits.
Oh.
So that's kind of when we find that little tricky thing. I had one this morning that the homeowner said, oh no, that wiring's been there since it was original. And I said, well, did you know that electrical wiring has a born-on date? This says 2019. and then they generally look at you like, huh, no, I didn't know that. And I'm thinking,
Yeah, and I shouldn't talk about the 50s or anythers because we have older homes than that in Richfield.
We
have
do.
40s and 30s.
Yep, what's the oldest house in Richfield? 1854?
Yeah, that's
something
the
like that.
Bartholomew
Yeah.
house.
But there's a few from the early 1900s too that are kind of scattered throughout. One on Apple Lane and one over in Oak Grove. I mean, there's a few older ones, and there are some 20s ones. But for the general purpose, it's 40s on up. So.
and I think the oldest permit we found was actually for, and there might be some older ones, we didn't search every address, but it was from 1939 for a summer house at Holy Angels Academy. So I'm not sure what year Holy Angels was built. I think it was obviously built before that.
Oh, yeah.
And but it was for I think a log-sided summer home at Holy Angels, and it was issued in 1939.
Wow. So okay, so obviously we had some building codes in 44. So probably soon after the city became a city, they started looking at how they wanted things built. Is that a correct statement?
I would think so, because even these old permits from the 40s, there were inspections done on these permits.
Right. And
So-
we have old building permits in our archives from back then too that they really wanted to keep after it even then. So,
And the state building code we talked about, it started in 1972. And I don't know, about, what, 5-6 years ago, it actually became the standard for statewide. So if you build anywhere in the state, you have to build to this standard. But in the 7-county metro area, it's required to be inspected, so you have to have an inspection on any buildings in the 7-county metro and most of the bigger cities. But I've got a little cabin up north of Duluth, or north of Grand Rapids. And I moved a shed onto a new slab, and so I got a building permit for it. And I don't know if they ever went out and looked at the setback, or they were worried about the setback to the lake. I had the septic, I had to put a new septic system in, so that was inspected, and the electrical was inspected, because electrical statewide. They didn't look at anything else. Nobody comes out to look at anything. So, I mean, and obviously it's built correctly, because I know what the codes are, but...
Yeah, you built it.
Yeah, but you get out state areas where there's no inspections, nobody looking at those things, and a lot of people just don't know how to build things.
So that's really, for any of our viewing audience that's thinking of purchasing a cabin and someday maybe turning it into more than a cabin, they got to really be careful. I mean, as terms of safety as to what they're doing. I mean, it kind of blows me away in a way that, that this building code is not totally statewide. There's
No, it's
still
just-
some, only this but not that.
right.
But
Yep.
I guess that's
We take it for granted how safe we are. I mean, really, if you have permits for things and it gets inspected, it's just, like I mentioned earlier, one extra layer of insurance.
yeah.
If you finish your basement without an electrical permit and you have a fire,
Yeah.
your insurance company can refuse to pay out.
See, and that's key for people to think about. It's not only, yes, you're satisfying the codes of the city, but your insurance people are very interested in that kind of stuff.
They are, and they call us on a regular basis and say, when's the last building permit you have for a roof on this house? And if you tell them, well, I don't have one, well, they can call you back and go, well, what do you mean you have hail damage on a 5-year-old roof? The city doesn't have any record of it. They said your roof was installed 24 years ago. So,
Is there a place where a homeowner can go online and just look at their record?
Yeah, you can go to the city website, and you have to, and I should be more clear on this, but there's a section we have called e-permits, because there's some permits you can get online.
Yeah,
And if you go to there and search for permits, you can type in your address and it'll show all the permits that are issued for your house.
I gotta, and then if I've got a copy but it's not on there, I can come see you and say, look, this is what I've
Well,
got.
if you have a copy, it'll be there. So,
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I've
should be,
lived in
yeah.
administration long enough to know people make mistakes.
Oh,
and
for
there-
sure.
Oh, absolutely. There's sometimes somebody will say they have a permit for something, and we'll go out there and it's like, we can't find a permit, and we're talking back and forth, say, I know I have a permit, and then we find out it got issued under a different address, whether they put it on the wrong address or
Or
we
it's
entered
just a
incorrectly a typo, and we look in the system on that address and they don't have a permit.
Yeah.
And yet they do, it's just sometimes takes a little harder to find it. So.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Not a whole lot of time left. I think we covered that adequately. I had one more topic here, just a little bit about rental housing. You kind of mentioned that you go out there every 2 years, you try to get around.
Yep, we try to get into every rental property every 2 years. We license on an annual basis, so they are issued a license every year. If you become a problem property, you get to get inspected every single year until you're not on the problem property list. And what gets you on that list is if you don't make your correction orders in a timely fashion. I mean, we go out, we do a rental inspection. It's very similar to the point of sale. We're just trying to keep every house and everybody safe and on a level playing field. Like we mentioned earlier, nobody wants to live next to a peely paint dilapidated property. But not only to keep up the housing stock, but also to kind of eliminate problem landlords. I mean, we're there to protect the tenants too.
Yes.
we get people that call and say, I live in this house and I don't think it's, I don't want him to know I called because they're going to kick me out. And we just really try to get out there and take care of issues. On the other hand, we get tenants who are being kicked out for whatever reason, and they call 2 days before they're getting evicted and say, this is the worst place ever. This is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And I say, either way, I'm going to go and investigate.
And look at it, yeah.
But we bring the property owner with us. No matter what the situation is, we bring the property owner with us so everybody can be on the same page. This ceiling's leaking, this drain's leaking, these smoke detectors aren't working. So we can work together to get compliance. I don't want them to say, well, I didn't know, or I didn't understand, or the back and forth between the tenant and the property owner is just not something we want. And some properties we have to work harder on. Some properties are larger and have a bigger, it's harder to keep a big property tidy and up to code than it is, a single family house. But we do try to convey to them that it's a business and they need to treat it like a business. And if they're getting rent, then they need to maintain a good and safe property.
Yeah, and I can see in Richfield with, certain areas especially, these, just like the houses, the apartment buildings were built in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
And they're, get old.
Yes, and I tell people on a regular basis, there's no shame in an old building. There is shame in a dirty, dilapidated one. There is no reason an apartment building from the 50s can't be a nice, tidy, kept up place. Yeah, and that's a big, big thing about keeping a good property is keeping it clean.
Yeah.
Because if you keep a clean property, then your tenants are going to want to keep it clean. If there's stuff all over the hallways and the parking lots, they're not going to hesitate to throw their McDonald's bags out the windows. Yeah. So.
Yeah, my son lives in an apartment in Lexington and Grand, and I'm sure it was probably built in the 20s or older. And it's old, but everything is neat and clean, nicely painted, and it's always maintained well, so.
Well, and that's key. I mean, in some cases, those old bricks are as strong and sturdy and long-lasting as anything built since. So it's really good. Well, our time has come to an end. I really appreciate you guys being in here filming. And I learned a lot, and I hope my audience learned a lot. And I'll always remember the inspectors are not on the dark side.
No, we're not to be anybody's enemy. We want to help you. So.
We're definitely here to help and happy to answer questions. That's why we're here.
So if people have questions, absolutely call our department and we'll answer them best we can. And we just want to help.
So I want to say thanks again. My guests tonight have been Rick Rignar and Jennifer Grimke, and thanks again for taking time to be on the show. And with that, good night.